I should like start off this review by like giving like a High Top Films-esque title to my video. Miss Marvel destroys me. That would be fun. That'd be like really blowing it out of proportion. Hey everyone, it's Movie Rants again, or should I say 1 minute 14-second trailer rants. That's right, we're looking at the most recent Miss Marvel trailer. It just came out on the day that this is being filmed. It's whipped up Twitter and the internet into some sort of frenzy. I think it's worth getting into, and as someone who really likes that character, I think I'm gonna lay some of my 10 cents on it. I'm gonna go down 4 things. I'm gonna talk about pros, I'm gonna talk about cons, I'm gonna talk about the power controversy, and I'm gonna talk about my hopes and fears for the character in the future of the MCU. So let's stretch on into it. First things first, I want to talk about things that I liked in regards to this trailer, and the thing that I loved the most was that it's aesthetically really different. I like that it's going towards this more warm, coming-of-age style of filmmaking that's not as focused on like big CGI backgrounds or like really large-scale like sets. I think it's cool to get more intimate, more personal. I think if this is going to be like more of a character study on Kamala and her coming of age and her coming to terms with like her identity, both in like her family aspect, but also the fact that she has powers right now. I think like the coming of age like style and formula is going to be really helpful with this. I also really enjoy like the creative flourishes of like thought bubbles or like people talking and their dialogue being written in little speech bubbles. I think that's really cool. I like that you can clearly see that there are going to be like fantasy-esque sequences where she's imagining something and it looks a lot better than how it actually is. Like in the trailer, you can see that there's this moment where she's in this like Captain Marvel outfit, and it looks really cool. It looks like a smaller version of the one that Brie Larson wore. And then when you see in reality, it's like a cheap Halloween costume. I think that's really cool, and if they play with that idea of fantasy versus reality throughout like the whole show, and it's done well, I think that can be a really creative, different style compared to like how a lot of the other shows are. I think one of the major issues with a lot of the Marvel TV shows is that stylistically, they're not that, like, different. Like, I think Hawkeye and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, while there's, like, I think they're very different in the sense of, like, how they are. I like Falcon and Winter Soldier a lot more than I liked Hawkeye. But I think if you look at, like, how they're shot relatively the same. I think WandaVision and Loki have, like, the advantage of being really different in the sense of like the tone that they're going for. Like Loki and WandaVision look different because one is like, we're going through the sitcoms, and the other's like, we're going through space. So color-wise they look different, but like stylistically WandaVision has a gimmick, so that's going to set it apart. So I think with like, between this and Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, between like Miss Marvel and Moon Knight and this upcoming She-Hulk show, it looks like the Disney Plus shows are going to be really going towards more like obscure type of, like not obscure, like more straightforward, like this is like a procedural, this is a coming of age, this is like an action adventure suspense thing. I think that's really cool. Also, I think that the actress who plays Kamala is really gonna do good. I like her dictation, I like her emotions. I think she's gonna, it's Iman, I believe. I'm gonna go Iman. I'm probably butchering that so badly, but I think she's gonna be a really good Kamala. Everything we've seen so far of her in this trailer, I think she's putting her entire heart and soul into it. And I think some of the stuff with like her and her family is going to resonate really well. I don't know who wrote this. I don't really know the directors, so I can't like be like, here's something to prove this. I'm just really hoping so, because like Miss Marvel means a lot to a lot of people, and I hope that they give proper representation to that character. I think something that's cool is that this is one of the first MCU characters, with the exception of Daredevil, but he was in the Netflix stuff. But, like, you know, this is one of the few first MCU characters who there is an actual focus on their religion and their beliefs, and how that ties into their, like, familial and, like, superhero relationship. I think that's really cool and really unique. And bringing in Kamala as this first Muslim MCU hero, it's important to, like, focus on her religion. And in the comics, her religion and her, like, beliefs are also important to that character. So I hope they like stay true to that aspect of her character as well. I like that it's small scale as well. Like it's nothing giant and there's no crazy like end of the world disaster that she has to stop. I like that it's more small scale because that's something I really like about the comics. She's just a kid from Jersey. Like her issues are not like Avengers level, but they're still really big for being in Jersey. And I think that's really cool. And I just want to talk about a couple cons that are not related to the powers. I'm deeply afraid that this is gonna be another, like, very stretched out MCU show. I think with them there's a lot of padding. You get like 4 really good episodes and then like 2 that are really rushed. I think with the story that they're telling, I feel like Ms. Marvel would have worked better as a movie. You get 2 hours, you get her powers, you have the budget to do the stretching. I'll get into it in a moment, but you have a 2-hour time limit. You can pace it well. She gets her powers, she deals with some stuff, she fights a low-level villain, she meets Carol at the end. I think with like the story that they're seeming to tell, basing on like her origin, I think it would have worked better as a movie. Heck, you could have made it a direct-to-streaming movie even. Also, I think that like on pure effects things, I think her new power effects don't look that cool. I think they look very generic. Like, the energy stuff feels like energy stuff we've seen in other movies. It's not very unique. I'm also afraid that, like, while I talked about the fact that, like, it's cool to see that they're, like, embracing part of the religious aspect, I'm afraid that maybe they also won't, because Disney very much is a fan of performative, like, wokeness, for lack of a better word. Like, you have, like, your 2 women kissing in the background of 2 seconds of Rise of Skywalker. I'm afraid that they're going to try and shy away from some of the heavier aspects of Kamala's life and backstory because it's easy. Like, in the trailer, you have this girl going, ooh, you have, like, a superhero shirt. And I'm like, oh, so it's just, like, 80s bullying? People don't bully other people for wearing nerd shirts, dude. I wear this fucking Captain Marvel shirt out and, like, no one cares. Like, in the comics, Kamala faces off against, like, genuine, like, racism and, like, microaggressions and, like, passive-aggressive comments about, like, why isn't she wearing a head covering? And, like, there's a lot of stuff that's, like, very real and very authentic to, like, her world experience that I'm afraid they're just gonna, like, pass over in this show. And also, like, you know, I'm a white guy from Ohio. Like, I'm not the best person to talk about, like, the experiences of, like, Muslim Americans. But I hope that they give, like, a genuine, like, they talk about it and they show, like, Kamala's actual, like, experiences. Because the comics do a really good job of having it feel like you're following real people. And I'm afraid they're gonna, like, Flanderize her character. And on that subject, I'm afraid that, like, they're gonna Flanderize her wanting to be Carol Danvers. I think if you look at the Marvels, like the show, the movie The Marvels is going to come out, I'm afraid that, like, they just went, alright, she's a fangirl, she likes superheroes, that's the character. Like, Kamala early on in her character is that, but as she grows and as she, like, becomes more her own person, she, like, goes away from that. And I think maybe that's, like, what this show is going to do, but I'm worried, like, you look at, like, Homecoming era Spider-Man, or, like, even Kate Bishop in, like, Hawkeye, we've seen a little bit too much of the fanboy, fangirl archetype from, like, MCU characters. Like, Kate Bishop being, like, in love with, like, the concept of Hawkeye. She's not actually in love with Hawkeye because, I mean, look at Jeremy Renner. But, like, this idea of, like, we've seen the fangirl character before in the MCU. They need to do something to set Kamala apart, and I'm afraid they won't do that. And here's the big thing. She doesn't have her classic comic powers. She's not stretchy, she can't embiggen, she's just stuck with these weird purple light constructs that maybe are magic, or maybe they're space technology, they come from a bracelet. We'll get into the bracelet. But here's, like, the major thing that's the issue with that. Yeah, sure, the MCU changes characters' powers or their looks or, like, backstories all the time. Like, Scourge the Executioner in Thor Ragnarok is nothing like he is in the comics. The Grandmaster in Thor Ragnarok he's not a lot like he is in the comics. He's not blue, and he's not, like, immortal. But, like, those things were changed, and they don't really affect the character or the story that much. But Kamala's stretchy powers are essential to her arc and her character and the way she grows in the comics. They're one of the things that is her trademark ability. And the reason that they're important is because they symbolize her growth. She's someone who feels different. She feels like she doesn't belong and she stands out in the world because of her faith, because of her interests, because of like her personality. So when she's given superpowers, these superpowers mirror her own insecurities. They're weird, they're loud, she doesn't really know how to control them. They make her stand out even more. So when she gets those powers for the first time, the first thing she does is transform into what she sees and what she thinks is the ideal superhero, which is white woman Carol Danvers. And as her like comic progresses and she grows to be more of like New Jersey's hero and her community upholds Miss Marvel and like they love her and she begins to love herself, she becomes more confident with these stretchy powers. And they're not just stretchy powers, they're embiggening powers. She can make her hands large, she can make her feet large, she can make her legs long, but she can go really small, she can go flat. She's not just like a stretchy person. But the thing is, getting rid of these embiggening powers and just replacing them with very like generic, cool looking, like big purple fist, like glowing orb feet, I get what they're going for, but it's a bad decision. You're erasing something that is essential to the character, and instead, what are you going to do with these powers? How is Kamala... These powers look cool, essentially. You can't do the same character stuff with her, and it also doesn't set her apart from the other MCU characters. A lot of characters have energy-related powers. Scarlet Witch, Captain Marvel, Thor, Loki, they have all these colorful powers, and so giving Kamala equally colorful, equally energy-looking powers doesn't make her seem different. It doesn't set her apart. And you could argue, well, they want to save the stretching for Mr. Fantastic. They're different powers. Also, we just had a movie with 3 different Spider-Men in them. We've had a couple different speedsters. A lot of people can fly. A lot of people have super strength. What you do as a creative in like a movie is if you have a character with similar powers, you find a way to make your character's powers seem different than the others. And here's the thing. Kamala's powers are different than Mr. Fantastic's. And her powers are tied to her character the way that Mr. Fantastic's aren't. It just feels wrong that they're butchering this character's like powers because it feels like they're gonna butcher her character because they're so close and tied together. One of the issues with like adaptation in movies is that when you look at the comics, characters are often really different. Like the Tony Stark of the MCU isn't like the pre-MCU Tony Stark of the comics. They're different. Movies change how the comics act, and sometimes the comics change how the movies act. Like you look at Ditko era Peter Parker. He's kind of an incel.
How do I look, yellow man?
You look like you're about to tell your friend not to come to school tomorrow, man.
But just because that Ditko Peter would like make weird, angry statements doesn't mean that there's still not stuff from that character that is essential to modern adaptations of Peter. You look at Tobey Maguire, you look at Andrew Garfield, you look at Tom Holland, they all take aspects and stuff that's important from the Ditko era. But here's the thing with Miss Marvel. Her adaptation, she's a very recent character. There's not this long history of stuff to pull from. And the stuff that they're pulling from, they're taking away some of the most important aspects of her, like, history. Like, for example, that bracelet, that's a bracelet from her great-grandmother who was fleeing a country. She'd hide money in it. There's a great historical and historical and familial importance to that bracelet. But now it's just like an energy construct. They're diminishing like the importance of parts of her history. And it just feels wrong. I hope that it's a good show because this is a character that a lot of people can see themselves represented by, and I hope it's like done well. But it just makes me nervous for her future. Like we've seen like some set leaks from the Marvels, and she has a really different suit. It's kind of based off one that she has in like one comic, but it feels like way too early to like even be switching up her suit designs. I don't really know what they're doing with this character. I've actually often referred to Kamala as the modern day Peter Parker in the sense that her struggles and her relatability are something that a lot of younger comic book readers can see themselves in. She struggles with being seen. She struggles with finding her identity. And I hope that this new show, like, has that same relatability, but I think that it looks like it's going for, like, an easier grasp at the character. Those are just some loose thoughts. I watched the trailer, like, a couple times today. I think the show looks fine. I'm hoping it's going to be better. I know there's probably some other things with it that, like, might be wrong. I don't know everything about, like, the production or the history, and I think that, like, this might be one of the first really big missteps for Marvel in the sense of adapting a character. I know a lot of people don't like the MCU Spider-Man. I think he's pretty solid. He's a different take, but he does still understand core concepts of that character. They don't, okay, yeah, sure, there's not like an Uncle Ben right away, but they make Aunt May the Uncle Ben. You understand that he has this concept of power and responsibility. Even before they say with great power comes great responsibility, you still understand that that concept and that character trait is installed in Peter Parker. When you meet him in Civil War, he's like, hey, when you have powers like mine and bad things happen, it's your fault. You get this aspect that is important to that character that you get from the Ditko era and other eras of Spider-Man. It's installed in this adaptation. That's important. And so with Ms. Marvel, I'm afraid that they're missing out on key, need-to-know information on how to do her character correctly. Also, if you are looking to, like, read some comics, I'm going to put up some pictures right here of really good Ms. Marvel comics. Her 2014 intro run was really good. She's really great in the Champions. Civil War II, while a terrible, terrible comic event that we should just not talk about, it had some really good Ms. Marvel stuff in it. She adopted a new costume, which I really liked. But, hey, here's hoping that I'm totally wrong and they fix everything, or the show's really good. But it's one that I'm going into with, like, a lukewarm, uneasy feeling. What do you think about the trailer? What do you think about this shorter, more sporadic movie rants? Leave some comments down below. I'll see you all in the future.